Hello, I know I said I would climb the stairs and be up in the craft room so we wouldn't have this crazy lighting, but yeah, I just can't manage those stairs. I should have done this earlier today, but I'm here. I'm going to go back and read, I think, the last paragraph I read before. This is when Mr. Bear had just come in. If Joe had not been otherwise engaged, Laurie's behavior would have amused her. For a faint twinge, got a message pop up. My page disappeared for a minute. A faint twinge, not of jealousy, but something like suspicion, caused that gentleman to stand aloof at first and observe the newcomer with brotherly circumspection, but it did not last long. He got interested in spite of himself, and before he knew it, he was drawn into the circle. For Mr. Bear talked well in this genial atmosphere and did himself justice. He seldom spoke to Laurie, but he looked at him often, and a shadow would pass across his face as if regretting his own lost youth as he watched the young man in his prime. Then his eyes would turn to Joe so wistfully that she would have surely answered the mute inquiry if she had seen it. But Joe had her own eyes to take care of, and feeling that they could not be trusted, she prudently kept them on the little sock she was knitting like a model maiden aunt. A stealthy glance now and then refreshed her like sips of fresh water after a dusty walk, for the sidelong peeps showed her several propitious omens. Mr. Bear's face had lost the absent-minded expression and looked all alive with interest in the present moment. Actually young and handsome, she thought, forgetting to compare him with Laurie, as she usually did strange men to their great detriment. Then he seemed quite inspired, though the burial customs of the ancients, to which the conversation had strayed, might not be considered an exhilarating topic. Joe quite glowed with triumph when Teddy got quenched in an argument, and then thought to herself as she watched her father's absorbed face, how he would enjoy having such a man as my professor to talk with every day. Lastly, Mr. Bear was dressed in a new suit of black, which made him look more like a gentleman than ever. His bushy hair had been cut and smoothly brushed, but didn't stay in order for long. For in exciting moments he rumpled it up in a droll way he used to, and Joe liked it rampantly erect better than flat, because she thought it gave his fine forehead a Jove-like aspect. Poor Joe, how she did glorify that plain man, as she sat knitting away so quietly, yet letting nothing escape her, not even the fact that Mr. Bear actually had gold sleeve buttons in his immaculate wristbands. Dear old fella, he couldn't have got himself up with more care if he'd been going a-wooing, said Joe to herself, and then a sudden thought born of the words made her blush so dreadfully that she had to drop her ball and go down after it to hide her face. He is going a-wooing. The maneuver did not succeed as well as she expected, however, for though just in the act of setting fire to a funeral pyre, the professor dropped his torch, metaphorically speaking, and made a dive after the little blue ball. Of course, they bumped their heads smartly together, saw stars, and both came up flushed and laughing without the ball, to resume their seats, wishing they had not left them. Nobody knew where the evening went to, for Hannah skillfully abstracted the babies at an early hour, nodding like two rosy poppies, and Mr. Lawrence went home to rest. The others sat round the fire talking away, utterly regardless of the lapse of time, till Meg, whose maternal mind was impressed with the firm conviction that Daisy had tumbled out of bed, and Demi set his nightgown afire, studying the structure of matches, made him move to go. "We must have our sing in the good old way, for we are all together again once more," said Joe, feeling that a good shout would be a safe and pleasant vent for the jubilant emotions of her soul. They were not all there, but no one found the words thoughtless or untrue, for Beth still seemed among them, a peaceful presence, invisible but dearer than ever. Since death could not break the household league that love made dissoluble, the little chair stood in its old place. The tidy basket with the bit of work she left unfinished when the needle grew so heavy was still on its accustomed shelf. The beloved instrument, seldom touched now, had not been moved, and above it Beth's face, serene and smiling as in the early days, looked down upon them, seeming to say, "Be happy, I'm here." "Play something, Amy. Let them hear how much you've improved," said Laurie, with pardonable pride in his promising pupil. But Amy whispered with full eyes as she twirled the faded stool, "Not tonight, dear. I can't show off tonight." But she did show something better than brilliancy or skill, for she sang Beth's songs with a tender music in her voice which the best master could not have taught, and touched the listeners' hearts with a sweeter power than any other inspiration could have given her. The room was very still when the clear voice failed suddenly at the last line of Beth's favorite hymn. It was hard to say, "Earth hath no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." And Amy leaned against her husband, who stood behind her, feeling that her welcome home was not quite perfect without Beth's kiss. "Now we must finish with Mignon's song, for Mr. Bear sings that," said Joe, before the pause grew painful, and Mr. Bear cleared his throat with a gratified "Hem." I need to do that too, as he stepped into the corner where Joe stood, saying, "You will sing with me? We go excellently well together." A pleasing fiction, by the way, for Joe had no more idea of music than a grasshopper. But she would have consented if he had proposed to sing a whole opera, and warbled away blissfully, regardless of time and tune. It didn't much matter, for Mr. Bear sang like a true German, heartily and well, and Joe soon subsided into a subdued hum, that she might listen to the mellow voice that seemed to sing for her alone. "Knowest thou the land where the citrons bloom?" used to be the professor's favorite line, for Das Land. Did he say Das Land? Oh. Meant Germany to him, but now he seemed to dwell with particular warmth and melody upon the words, "There, oh there might I with thee, oh my beloved, go." And one listener was so thrilled by the tender invitation that she longed to say she did know the land and would joyfully depart thither whenever he liked. The song was considered a great success, and the singer retired covered with laurels. But a few minutes afterward he forgot his manners entirely and stared at Amy putting on her bonnet, for she had been introduced simply as "my sister," and no one called her by her new name since he came. Every time I read my notes, this is the vibrations. No one had called her by her new name since he came. He forgot himself still further when Laurie said, in his most gracious manner at parting, "My wife and I are very glad to meet you, sir. Please remember that there is always a welcome waiting for you over the way." Then the professor thanked him so heartily and looked so suddenly illuminated with satisfaction that Laurie thought him the most delightfully demonstrative old fellow he ever met. I too shall go, but I shall gladly come again if you will give me leave, dear madam, for a little business in the city will keep me here some days. He spoke to Mrs. March, but he looked at Joe, and the mother's voice gave as cordial an assent as did the daughter's eyes, for Mrs. March was not so blind to her children's interest as Mrs. Moffat supposed. I suspect that is a wise man, remarked Mr. March with placid satisfaction from the hearthrug after the last guest had gone. I know he's a good one, added Mrs. March with decided approval as she wound up the clock. I thought you'd like him, was all Jo said as she slipped away to her bed. She wondered what the business was that brought Mr. Bear to the city, and finally decided that he had been appointed to some great honor somewhere, but had been too modest to mention the fact. If she had seen his face when safe in his own room, he looked at the picture a severe and rigid young lady with a good deal of hair, who appeared to be gazing darkly into futurity. It might have thrown some light upon the subject, especially when he turned off the gas and kissed the picture in the dark. That's it, finally, woo! In only 11 minutes, almost 12 minutes. Okay. So, tomorrow we'll get to 21, finally. Love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Hope you sleep well tonight. Nighty-night.